And welcome to another edition of the Traction Reaction Podcast. Steve Zock here. Mark Montieth of Indianapolis. And Mark, kind of explain your background.
Well, I grew up in Indianapolis, native here. Knew from a young age that I wanted to be a sports writer. So I worked for newspapers mostly, covering the race in the 1980s, and I covered the Pacers for a number of years for the Indianapolis Star, and spent a lot of time in Milwaukee covering Pacer Bucks games. And just a general newspaper sports writer. Retired in 2008, and since then I've been a freelancer, done a couple of books, and also this other freelance writing.
And I love your stuff, especially on Indy, the month of May, Indy 500 time. As posts, kind of talk about the interviews and whatnot you post during the month of May in the past and in the future now.
Yeah, I had a radio show on the ESPN affiliate here in Indianapolis for 6 years, from like 2009 to 2015. And I had a chance to do a lot of long-form interviews during that time with a lot of race drivers and a lot of former basketball players, ABA and NBA Pacers. Any athlete who made a name for himself in Indiana, I did a show with. So some of the racers included Mario Andretti, Johnny Rutherford, Rick Mears, Bobby Unser, Al Unser Jr., guys like that. So really enjoyed doing that.
Those are still available on your website, correct?
Yeah, markmontieth.com. It's MONTIETH, markmontieth.com. It's a one-time membership fee of $19.95, and all the episodes of my one-on-one show are there.
And as someone that's a fan of not only motorsports but basketball too, it's a treasure trove of interviews on there. I really appreciate them. For me, from Milwaukee, coming down, driving down I-65 to Indianapolis, they sound great on the radio. It takes it can be kind of a long drive, but like I say, if you're listening to a good interview, which these are, they're fantastic stuff. But tell us about your latest project here. This is something that's been I guess you could say in the works for a while.
Yeah, Angelo Angelopoulos is the author of this book on Bill Vukovich. He wrote this in the late 1950s, but it never got published, and I really have no idea why. There were articles in the newspaper that this was going to come out in the spring of 1960, and it did not. But about a year ago this time, I learned that the manuscript for his book still existed. It was in the closet of his nephew. Angelo's nephew, Pete Curlis, had the typewritten, hand-edited manuscript in his closet, and Pete loaned it to me, and I read through it and thought it was pretty good, worth publishing. So I finally got it out. It was really a labor of love. It was not easy to do. My wife deserves a lot of credit because she took this double-spaced typewritten manuscript and with all the handwriting on it and typed it into a laptop so that I could begin editing. And I think that's why it had never been published before. I know a lot of people had seen that manuscript over the years, but I think just looking at it scared them off because it was going to take a lot of work just to begin editing it, really. So it's a mystery in a way because, again, I have no idea why the book was not published before, but I'm happy to get it done for Angelo.
Well, and Angelo is, especially for those who might not be familiar, in Indianapolis, he was kind of like the guy in the 50s on this when it came to sports writing. He was so well respected, and unfortunately died early, didn't he?
Yeah, Angelo had it all. He was a handsome guy. He was a really talented sports writer. He was a humble guy. Everybody liked him, had no ego hang-ups. He was married to a local model. He just seemed to have the perfect life. And he had been a veteran of World War II, so he had kind of that macho element about him as a war hero. Problem is that when he was in the Navy, as a pilot, he was assigned to fly over Japan in the bombing sites. After they dropped the big bombs in Japan, he flew over them. The radiation from that led him to a diagnosis of leukemia in 1955. So here's a guy who has it all, and he comes down with leukemia, and he winds up dying in 1962 at the age of 43. Just kind of withered away. A very sad thing. He never complained. He continued working until the very end. He worked on this book. This book was his primary project during that time because he was diagnosed, I believe, shortly after Vukovich was killed in the 55 race. And they were close friends, so he wanted to get this book out, and it stalled for whatever reason. So I'm happy to be the guy who got his book out for him.
Well, it looks to be a wonderful book, and wasn't this his second book? Because he's got that At Speed, was it? And that was
Yeah, well, there's a book called The Race.
The Race.
And Angelo wrote the captions for that book. Yeah, that's basically a photo book that Angelo wrote kind of extended captions for it. I have not seen that book. I've heard much about it.
It's a neat book because it's got a lot of photos in it that, especially if someone's familiar with the Indy 500 in history, there's all those iconic photos you see. But in that book, if you go to like the Indy 500 Collector Show they have here, that's coming up in a few weeks, that book is available. It's actually a spiral. Some of them were spiral bound, and it's a really neat book because the photos in there are photos you won't see in any other book. It's pretty neat. But walk us through, because now Bob Gates helped you with the book. He came out with a book on Bill Vukovich too, but this is kind of, for those who already got a book on Bill Vukovich, this is interesting because there's a little bit of a different look at it, isn't it?
Yeah. Bob is a great guy, and he helped me with this. He loaned me photographs and directed me to certain people who were helpful. He wrote a book about 20 years ago on Bill Vukovich. But this is different because it was written kind of in the present tense of Vukovich's career. Angelo was in the garage with Vukovich. He was at dinner with Vukovich. So, you are there. You're on the scene with Vukovich in his garage as he's winning these races and getting a lot of personal insight into Bill Vukovich. So it's a much different type of book. It's a book of the 1950s. Again, this book should have come out in the spring of '60, and here it is all these years later, 65 years later, basically, the book is finally coming out. But it's a book that kind of takes you onto the scene of Bill Vukovich's races and his life.
Yeah, it's interesting because from somebody who may have just read about Vukovich and you see photos of him, he seems to be such a gruff person, but for those, I've talked to people who have known him, everybody liked him.
He was a down-to-earth guy, no ego hang-ups. He didn't want attention. He kind of hid from the media. He was just there to race. He was a genuine racer. He grew up poor in California, had tragedy in his life. His father committed suicide. I compare Bill Vukovich to Larry Bird. Small town guys, blue collar guys, tragedy in the family that their fathers committed suicide, low ego for being such a star, didn't care much about money, didn't care about attention or fame, just tough guys who were, once you got to know them, difficult to get to know perhaps, but once you got to know them, you really liked them because he had a sharp sense of humor and just a good guy to be around, a really straightforward, honest guy. So, Bill Vukovich, to those who did get to know him, was a really well-liked guy, easy to get along with, and much beloved.
So how does somebody get this book if they're watching this online?
Well, it's on Amazon.com.
Okay.
If you're in Indianapolis, it's in Indianapolis bookstores. I have a website, markmontieth.com, again, which the book can be purchased through there.
How do you spell your last name again for those?
Montieth. I'm on social media, Facebook and Twitter. You can reach out to me there as well, and I will ship directly to people at a discounted price.
All right, I really appreciate it. I'd like to thank USAC for their hospitality tonight. We're having a little, like a book fair and whatnot with people with photos and that. It's a good time here, so we appreciate their hospitality. Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.